The lot sat behind a lumber yard on a dirt track off County Road 7, and most people in Calvert Fork, Kentucky had forgotten it was there. A chain-link fence, a collapsed tarp, and underneath, a 1974 Chevrolet P30 ice cream truck rusted along the wheel wells, silent for years, sitting on 4 flat tires in a gravel patch that cost $18 a month to rent. Nobody had driven it since the summer of 2019. Nobody had asked about it since the man who owned it died in November of 2022. He left no will. He left no instructions. He left only the truck and a $6 impound fee that his 20-year-old daughter paid on a Tuesday afternoon with coins from the bottom of her bag. Her name was Mara Hensley. She had been sleeping in borrowed spaces for 11 months, a truck cab, a shelter cot, a friend's couch that stopped being available in February. 1 semester of community college. No savings. No plan that reached past the following week. She had driven 4 hours on a borrowed Silverado with a broken wiper blade and a CB radio that picked up nothing but static and old country songs, because a county clerk had told her the truck was the only thing her father had ever put her name on. She did not know what she expected to find. She did not expect much. Dale Hensley had been a welder, not a famous one, not a wealthy one. He had worked the rail yard until the rail yard closed, and after that he worked whatever came: barn repairs, equipment fabrication, seasonal jobs that paid in cash and left no record. Summers he ran the ice cream truck on rural routes through 3 counties, selling soft serve to children who grew up and forgot his name. He was not a man who talked about what he felt. He was a man who measured twice, cut once, and laid a bead so clean it looked machined. People in Calvert Fork knew him the way you know someone who always shows up and never makes noise about it. Steady. Private. Gone too soon and too quietly. What nobody knew, what Mara herself did not know until she crawled beneath the service counter with a pry bar and a borrowed socket set, was that Dale Hensley had been building something inside that truck for 14 years. Not the truck itself, not the engine or the bodywork. Something underneath. Something welded shut from the inside, lined with roofing felt, sealed against moisture and time and the ordinary disasters that take everything from people who cannot afford to lose it. He had been making deposits the way other men make prayers. Alone, in the dark, without telling anyone, trusting that the right person would eventually look at the floor of things instead of the ceiling. When the second panel came open, the smell of machine oil and old bills rose into the evening air of Lot 9, and Mara Hensley sat on the floor of her father's truck for a long time without moving. What he had left her was not just money, it was a record. 14 years of summer routes and winter side jobs and $18 monthly fees paid without complaint. All of it pointing forward, all of it pointing at her. A father who had never found the right words had spent 14 years building the sentence anyway, one careful weld at a time, and sealed it inside a rusted box that cost $6 to claim. The county clerk's office in Harlan smelled like toner and old carpet, and the woman behind the counter had the practiced patience of someone who had delivered bad news so many times it no longer required preparation. She slid a single sheet across the laminate desk without ceremony. Mara Hensley picked it up with both hands. She read it twice. The sheet listed one asset under the estate of Dale Raymond Hensley, deceased November 14, 2022. A 1974 Chevrolet P30 ice cream truck stored at Caldwell Impound Lot, Calvert Fork, Kentucky. Assessed value, $0. Outstanding lot fee, $6. Mara had turned 23 weeks before her father died. She had not been living at home. There was no home technically. Not since the rental on Sycamore Street was vacated in August, when Dale stopped paying and stopped answering his phone, and she found out later he had already known about the diagnosis by then. She had spent the fall on a shelter cot in Harlan, then a borrowed corner of a friend's apartment in Cumberland, then the sleeper cab of a cousin's Peterbilt when the apartment stopped being available in February. 11 months of provisional spaces. 11 months of knowing the next one might not appear. She had 1 semester of Harlan Community College behind her, a duffel bag with 3 changes of clothes, and $43 in a checking account that charged her a $5 monthly fee for the privilege of having it. The clerk told her the $6 could be paid by cash or money order. Mara paid in coins. She counted them out on the counter without apology. Quarters, dimes, 2 nickels. And the clerk accepted them without comment and stamped the transfer form with a sound like a period at the end of a long sentence. Outside, the February air was raw and flat. Mara sat in the parking lot on a concrete curb for a while, the stamped form folded in her jacket pocket, and looked at the bare trees across Route 421 without seeing them. She had no particular feeling about it. She pressed her palms to her knees and stood up. She had met Dale Hensley's truck before, not well and not recently. She remembered it from the summer she was 9, a single afternoon when he had pulled up to the house on Sycamore Street in it and let her ride in the back on a turned-over milk crate while he ran a route through 2 townships. The truck had been white once, with a hand-painted banner along the side in red and blue. She remembered the generator noise and the smell of the soft serve mix warming in its holding tank, and the way Dale had handled the window without looking at it, his eyes always on the road ahead. She had asked him once why he did it, drove around selling ice cream when he could be doing something else. He had thought about it for a moment. Then he said it kept him outdoors. That was all he said. The Caldwell lot sat off County Road 7 behind a lumber yard that had itself been half idle for years. Mara borrowed her cousin's 1998 Silverado. The Peterbilt was on a run to Lexington, and drove the 4 hours on a Tuesday afternoon in early March. The passenger side wiper blade was missing its rubber insert and left a smear arc across the glass every time it cycled. A CB radio mounted under the dash picked up nothing but static broken occasionally by fragments of old country music. A steel guitar hanging in the air for a few seconds before dissolving back into white noise. She did not mind. She drove with the heat on low and the window cracked an inch, watching the road narrow from 2 lanes to 1 as Route 421 became County Road 7, and County Road 7 became a gravel fork behind the lumber yard's chain-link perimeter. The lot appeared at the end of a dirt track, announced by a plywood sign with the name Caldwell painted in black and a phone number beneath it. It was not large, maybe 30 vehicles total, arranged in loose rows, most of them pickup trucks and work vans in various states of completion. A single portable office unit sat near the entrance, its steps made from stacked concrete blocks. Mara parked the Silverado and sat for a moment, engine running, looking at the rows. She found the truck on her second pass with her eyes. Row 3 from the left, far end. A tarp, blue-gray with age, had collapsed on one side so that it covered the cab, but left the rear quarter of the truck exposed. The rear quarter was rust brown along the wheel well seam, the white paint beneath it puckered and gone. It looked smaller than she remembered. She walked to it across the gravel, the cold coming up through her boot soles. She lifted the tarp edge and ducked under to see the driver's side door. The paint was crazed and lifting in thumbnail-sized flakes along the door's lower edge. The wing mirror was gone, leaving only the mounting bracket. Mara tried the door handle. It opened on the first pull. The hinges moved without resistance, without the groan she expected, smooth and quiet. She stood holding the door open for a moment. She ran one finger along the hinge barrel. Fresh grease. Recently applied. Within the last year she would have guessed, maybe less. Her father had been here. He had been here after the truck stopped running, after the roots stopped, after the diagnosis, and he had greased the door hinges. She did not go inside yet. She let the door fall gently shut and walked the perimeter of the truck instead, lifting the tarp where it sagged to look at the body. The rear serving door was padlocked with a laminated steel lock she did not have a key to. The roof had a long rust seam running from the vent housing back toward the rear, but it had not breached, no daylight showing when she squinted up at the underside of the tarp. The tires were flat, all four. The rubber cracked at the sidewall bead. The truck had not moved in a long time. Everything about it said abandonment, said end of story. Everything except the door hinges and a padlock whose shackle was clean and unoxidized, the same bright silver as something new. The man from the portable office had come out while she was walking the perimeter. He stood a few feet back, hands in the front pockets of his canvas work jacket, saying nothing. He was older, somewhere past 60, with a face that had spent most of its life in weather. His name, she would learn, was Earl Voss, and he had been running the Caldwell lot for 19 years. He did not ask her who she was or what she wanted. He looked at the truck, then at her, and seemed to do some private arithmetic. Mara showed him the transfer form. He glanced at it, nodded once, and handed it back. She asked if he had a pry bar and a socket set she could borrow. He went back inside the portable office without a word. He returned with a 30-inch pry bar, a 3/8-inch socket set in a cracked plastic case, and a work light on an extension cord that he plugged into the lot's exterior outlet without being asked. He set them down beside the truck's rear door, looked at the padlock, and produced a key from his jacket pocket. He said Dale had left it with him in the fall of 2022. He said he thought someone would come eventually. Then he went back inside, and the space heater in the portable office clicked on, and Mara Hensley stood alone beside her father's truck in the last of the afternoon light, the pry bar cold in her hand, the work light humming on the gravel at her feet. Dale Raymond Hensley was born in 1958 in a 2-room house on the far side of Clover Ridge, the second of 4 children, the only one who stayed in Harlan County when the others left for Cincinnati and Louisville, and a cousin's floor in Columbus. He had finished high school in 1976, taken a 6-month welding certificate at the Vocational Center on Pine Mountain Road, and gone directly to work at the Eastern Kentucky Rail Yard, where he would spend the next 31 years running a MIG torch on freight car chassis and heavy equipment frames. He was not a foreman. He did not want to be. He showed up at 6, worked until 3, ate his lunch at the same picnic table behind the fabrication shed every day regardless of weather, and drove home in a succession of used pickup trucks that he maintained himself in a gravel driveway. That was most of what there was to say about his working life, and he would not have said more. The rail yard closed in 2009. Not all at once. First the overnight shifts, then the contract work, then the core staff, then the lights. Dale was 51. He had a small amount saved, a truck with 2 years left on its payments, and a set of welding equipment. A Lincoln Electric Ranger 250 engine-driven welder, on a 2-wheel cart, 2 helmets, 4 spools of wire, and a cutting torch rig that he owned outright and kept in a rented storage unit on the edge of town. He had no debt besides the truck. He had no plan besides finding the next thing. He was not a man who catastrophized, and he was not a man who asked for help. And so the transition from employed to not employed happened in his life the way most things happened. Quietly, without announcement, and without visible distress. The ice cream truck came from an estate auction in 2009, the same summer the rail yard closed. A Morganfield dairy operation had folded, and its assets, 2 bulk tanks, a pasteurizer, a walk-in cooler, and the 1974 Chevrolet P30 went on the block on a Saturday morning in August. Dale paid $420 for the truck, drove it home on a temporary tag, and spent the following 3 weekends going over it with the thoroughness of a man who understood fabricated metal and its failure points. He replaced the generator brushes, reseated the evaporator coil, pulled the service counter and refitted it with a new stainless steel pan, and welded a cracked frame rail on the driver's side that would have failed within a season. He had it running routes by Memorial Day of 2010. He charged $1.25 for a soft serve cone and $1.50 for a dipped one, and he did not raise prices for 9 years. The routes took him through 3 counties on a circuit he varied by day of the week. He knew where the school bus stops were and what time the afternoon buses ran, and he knew which farm roads had families with small children, and which ones had gone over to vacation rentals and second homes where nobody came out. He kept a composition notebook in the glove box with hand-drawn maps of each route, updated in pencil each season. He noted which customers were regulars, which ones came out twice a summer, and which ones came out every Friday. He noted if a family seemed short one week and adjusted the price without comment. A woman on County Road 11 named Beverly Marsh once tried to pay him with a jar of sourwood honey because she was low on cash, and Dale had taken it and recorded the transaction in his notebook as paid and never mentioned it again. Neighbors in Calvert Fork and the surrounding townships remembered him in short sentences. A man named Garrett Poole, who ran a small engine repair shop on Route 7, said Dale had come by one winter and fixed a cracked axle housing on Garrett's flatbed without being asked and without sending a bill. When Garrett brought it up later, Dale said he had been passing and had the equipment in the truck. That was his explanation. A woman named Ruth Caudle, who had lived 3 properties down from the Caldwell lot for 20 years, said Dale used to pull in and park on Friday evenings in the summer, and that the children in the neighborhood knew the sound of his generator the way they knew the sound of the school bell. She said he always stayed until the last child had come out, even if that meant sitting an extra 40 minutes. He did not honk. He did not play the jingle box past 7 in the evening because he said it was rude to the people trying to sleep. The photograph tacked inside Earl Voss's portable office was small and slightly out of focus, taken on what looked like a bright summer afternoon. Dale stood beside the truck with one hand resting on the serving window frame. He was wearing a canvas shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and his forearms showed the small pale scars that accumulate on a welder's skin over 3 decades. Spatter marks, each one a fraction of an inch. So numerous they became a texture rather than individual marks. He was not smiling in the photograph, but he was not smiling either. He had the expression of a man who has been caught in the middle of something he considered ordinary and does not see the reason for the camera. Earl said someone from the County Historical Society had come by 2 summers ago to photograph local businesses for an archive project. Dale had stood still for the picture and then gone back to work. He had not asked for a copy. The diagnosis came in September of 2022. Pancreatic. Dale had known something was wrong since spring, had ignored it in the methodical way he ignored things that could not be fixed with available tools, and had finally gone to the clinic in Harlan when the weight loss became difficult to explain to himself. He told no one. He paid his lot fee for October and November in advance, in cash, in an envelope he left in Earl Voss's mailbox. He greased the door hinges on the truck on a Tuesday in October, according to Earl, who had seen him in the lot and offered to help, and been told there was nothing to help with. He drove back to the house on Sycamore Street, which he had already quietly arranged to vacate in December. He put a padlock on the truck's rear door and left the key with Earl in a small envelope with Mara's name written on the front in ballpoint pen. He did not explain the envelope. Earl had kept it in the cash drawer for 4 months until a 20-year-old woman with a duffel bag and $43 in her account drove up a dirt track behind a lumber yard and asked if she could borrow a pry bar. There was no other estate to speak of. A checking account with a balance of $9.11 closed by the bank upon notification of death. A storage unit on the edge of town, paid through December, containing the Lincoln Electric welder on its cart, 2 helmets and 4 partial spools of wire. The storage unit operator had held the contents for 90 days past the lease expiration, and then, having found no next of kin to contact, had sold the welder at a tool auction for $315. The helmets and the wire went in a bin. Dale Hensley had owned those tools for 26 years. He had run approximately 1,440 route days on the truck across 13 summers. He had greased the door hinges one last time in October. And then he had gone home and closed things up and waited. The way a man waits who has done what he set out to do and does not see the point in making a production of the ending. She left the Harlan shelter at 7:10 on a Tuesday morning in early March, before the breakfast line finished and before the overnight staff handed over to the day shift. The borrowed Silverado was parked on the street outside, its windshield fogged from the cold, and Mara had to run the defroster on high for 4 minutes before she could see clearly enough to pull out. She had her duffel in the back seat, the county transfer form folded in her jacket's inner pocket, and a paper bag with a gas station biscuit and a small coffee that had cost her $2.11. She had not slept particularly well. She had not slept particularly well in 11 months, so this was not a new condition. Route 421 ran southeast out of Harlan through the kind of country that looks stripped in early March. Bare ridge lines, creek banks showing pale root tangles where the water had undercut them, fields that were neither dormant nor growing but suspended in the gray interval between. The road was 2 lanes, center-striped, with the occasional pull-off where a coal truck could wait for a wide load coming the other direction. Mara had driven this road before, years ago, when Dale still had the house on Sycamore Street and she had taken the bus home for a weekend in November. She remembered the road being longer then. Everything had been longer then. She drove at a steady 50, the defective wiper blade smearing its arc across the glass every 12 seconds, and ate the biscuit one-handed without tasting it. The CB radio mounted under the dash was not hers, and she had not turned it on intentionally, but it had come on with the ignition, and she had left it. It cycled through static and fragments, the kind of transmission that never resolved into a full sentence. A dispatcher's clipped syllables, a trucker's road number, the tail end of a weather report that predicted nothing useful. Then for a stretch of maybe 4 miles between 2 ridges where the signal strengthened for reasons she could not explain, a steel guitar came through clean and full, some old song she did not know the name of, unhurried and unaccompanied, the kind of melody that does not try to make you feel anything in particular, and so makes you feel everything. Mara turned the volume down but did not turn it off. The song lasted until the road bent east and the static returned. At Bledsoe, she turned south onto County Road 7. The road changed immediately. The center stripe disappeared, the asphalt narrowed by a full lane's width, and the tree line on both sides came closer, the bare branches meeting overhead in places to form a gray lattice against the sky. The Silverado's suspension registered the change in road quality through the seat, a low, continuous conversation between the truck and the broken chip seal beneath it. She passed a church with its marquee sign blown blank by winter wind, the letters scattered in the grass beside the parking lot. She passed a farmhouse set far back from the road with a light on in one downstairs window and smoke rising from a chimney, straight up in the still air. She passed a mailbox painted to look like a largemouth bass, its mouth open and its tail serving as the flag. The road kept narrowing. The gravel fork appeared without a sign, just a break in the tree line on the right side where the surface changed from cracked asphalt to packed limestone gravel. Mara slowed and turned. The gravel was deep and the Silverado's rear end shifted slightly on it, the way a truck does when it finds less resistance than it expected. She dropped to second gear. The lumberyard's chain-link fence appeared on her left, running parallel to the track, and through it she could see the yard's inventory. Stacked dimensional lumber under corrugated metal roofing, a log loader parked at the far end with its boom down, 2 flatbeds sitting empty on a concrete pad. The yard itself was quiet. A handwritten sign on the fence said deliveries by appointment only, Tuesdays and Thursdays. The dirt track branched off the gravel about a quarter-mile in, unmarked, and she almost missed it. She caught the Caldwell plywood sign at the last moment and swung right, the truck dropping off the gravel edge with a lurch that sloshed her coffee onto the cup holder. The dirt was frozen in the morning cold, and the surface was ridged from previous tire tracks that had set in mud and hardened, and the Silverado moved over them with a steady rocking that she felt in her spine. The tree line closed in on both sides. The sky narrowed to a corridor. She drove the last 200 yards in low gear with both hands on the wheel and arrived at the lot entrance to find it exactly as the county clerk's sheet had implied. A chain-link gate standing open, a plywood sign, a portable office unit on concrete blocks, and 30 vehicles in various states in 3 loose rows. She sat for a moment with the engine running. The lot was quiet in the particular way that outdoor spaces are quiet in early March, when the birds have not come back and the insects are still months away, and the only sound is the wind finding gaps in the fence line. She could see the collapsed tarp from the entrance, 3rd row, far end, the corner of something white and rust-brown showing beneath it where the tarp had given way. She turned the engine off. The silence was immediate and complete, and she sat in it for a moment with her hands still on the wheel. Then she picked up her coffee from the cup holder, wiped the spilled portion with her sleeve, and got out. The cold hit her across the face and the backs of her hands. The gravel of the lot was different from the track's frozen dirt, finer, more compacted, and it gave slightly under her boots with a sound like compressed sugar. She walked the 2 rows between the entrance and the truck without looking at any of the other vehicles, keeping her eyes on the collapsed tarp. Up close, the truck was larger than it had seemed from the entrance. The tarp, once blue, had faded to a color without a specific name, and the rope that had once secured its corners had rotted at 2 of the 4 tie-down points, which was why it had collapsed on the rear quarter. She reached out and gripped the tarp's loose edge with both hands and lifted it. A smell came out. Cold metal, old rubber, and beneath both of those something fainter that she identified after a moment as the soft-serve mix, or the memory of it, a sweetness that had saturated the truck's seams over 13 summers and had never fully left. The rear quarter of the truck, now exposed, showed the full extent of the rust along the wheel well seam, a browning that had gone through the paint and into the body metal, though not yet through it. She ran her thumb along the seam. It was rough and granular, like dried creek mud. The white paint above the rust line was crazed in a fine network of cracks, lifting at the edges in places but not yet peeling away. She moved to the driver's side door and tried the handle. It opened on the first pull, the hinges moving without a sound, and the faint smell of fresh petroleum grease reached her before the door had swung fully open. She stood holding the door and looked at the hinge barrel and confirmed what she had already understood. He had been here. Not long before the end, he had driven out to this lot on a cold October Tuesday and knelt in the gravel with a grease gun and made sure the door would open easily for whoever came. She pressed the door gently shut with her palm. She stood with her hand flat against the cold painted metal for a moment. Then she turned and walked to the portable office to find Earl Voss and ask about a pry bar. Earl Voss set the tools down beside the truck's rear door without comment and went back to his portable office, and Mara stood for a moment looking at what he had brought. The pry bar was 30 inches of hardened steel with a curved nail-pulling end and a flat chisel end, its surface worn to a dull silver along the working edges from years of use. The socket set was a 3/8-inch drive in a cracked plastic case, a mix of standard and metric, several sockets rattling loose because the foam insert had compressed and no longer held them. The work light was a trouble light on a 25-foot orange extension cord, a wire cage around a single 100-watt bulb, the kind that has been standard in farm shops and garages since before Mara was born. She plugged it in and hung it on the truck's door latch by its hook, and the interior of the serving compartment came up in yellow light, sharp-shadowed, every surface suddenly specific. She started at the rear door and worked forward. The serving compartment was roughly 8 feet long and 4 feet wide, with the service counter running the full length of the passenger side. A stainless steel work surface on a painted steel frame, with a lower cabinet beneath it that had once held the soft serve machine and the mix reservoir. The soft serve equipment was gone, removed at some point and not replaced, leaving the cabinet empty and the floor beneath it visible. The floor was painted plywood over a steel subfloor, and it was the subfloor that Mara was interested in, because Dale's letter, which she had not yet found and did not yet know existed, had not guided her here. What guided her here was something simpler. The truck was the only thing he had left her, and he had greased the hinges, and the padlock was new, and a man who showed love through fabrication does not leave a locked box empty. She started with the cabinet beneath the counter, removing the 2 interior shelves, simple plywood panels resting on steel pins, no fasteners, and setting them outside on the gravel. The cabinet floor was painted the same gray as the rest of the subfloor, and she went over it with her palm, feeling for irregularities. Nothing. She moved to the floor in front of the counter, the open space where a person would stand to work the window, and went over that section the same way. The paint was thick in places and thin in others, the brushwork uneven in the way of a man who painted floors only when they needed it and not before. She found one seam in the plywood subfloor, a standard construction joint running perpendicular to the truck's long axis. Nothing unusual. She tapped it with her knuckle. Solid below. An hour passed. The light outside the truck went from the flat gray of morning to the slightly warmer gray of midday without changing the temperature appreciably. Mara's breath was visible when she knelt in the compartment and not visible when she stood upright near the door, and she moved between the 2 positions enough times that she stopped noticing. She worked methodically, not urgently. She had learned somewhere, she could not have said where, that methodical and urgent were incompatible, and that the thing you were looking for was almost always found in the section you had already dismissed. She went back to the cabinet beneath the counter, and this time removed the kick plate at the base, a 4-inch tall painted steel panel that ran the length of the cabinet, secured with 4 slotted screws. 2 of the screws turned freely. The other 2 had been painted over, the slots filled, and she had to score them with the flat end of the pry bar before the screwdriver would bite. Behind the kick plate was a recess between the cabinet frame and the truck's steel floor rail, a 3-inch gap, dark, furred with old dust and a single dead moth. She put the work light close and looked. At the far left end of the recess, almost at the wheel well, she could see a change in the surface, not the flat painted steel of the floor rail, but something built up, layered, a slight ridge running parallel to the length of the truck. She pressed her fingertips against it. Spray foam insulation, compressed and hardened, 2 layers thick by the feel of it, deliberately packed. She sat back on her heels. She took the chisel end of the pry bar and worked it carefully into the spray foam, not prying yet, just probing, feeling for what was beneath. The foam was dense and resisted the bar with a dry, crumbling sound, coming away in chunks that she pulled out with her fingers and dropped on the gravel outside. It took 20 minutes to clear a 6-inch section, and what she found beneath it was a weld seam, a clean, continuous MIG bead running the full length of the floor panel, the kind of bead that takes experience to lay without porosity, the kind of bead that does not exist in a factory-built truck. Fabricated, added, her father's work, unmistakably, the bead profile the same as the one she had seen on the repaired frame rail on the driver's side, the same hand. She sat on the floor of the compartment with her back against the far wall and looked at it for a moment. The work light threw the weld seam into sharp relief, every ripple in the bead casting a small shadow. She thought about what it had taken to lay that bead from inside the compartment, the angle, the access, the patience required to hold a consistent arc in a confined space without burning through the floor panel. She thought about her father kneeling in this same space, helmet down, the arc light flickering blue-white against the steel walls. She wiped her face on the back of her hand. Then she picked up the pry bar. The resistance was real. The weld was not decorative. It was structural, intended to hold. And it held. She worked the chisel end of the bar along the seam in 6-inch increments, applying steady leverage rather than impact. And the panel flexed before it gave, the steel bowing slightly downward under the bar's pressure before the weld popped with a sound she felt through her palms as much as heard. She moved 6 inches and did it again. Then, again. The third section gave more easily than the first two, and the fourth almost immediately. And she understood that the panel was designed to open once the initial resistance was broken, that the welds were spaced to fail in sequence rather than all at once. It was not a weld meant to seal forever. It was a weld meant to hold until someone with a pry bar and enough patience came along and opened it properly. The full length of the panel took 40 minutes. At the far right end, near the center of the compartment, she found the hinge, a full-length piano hinge, 3 feet of brass-plated steel, its barrel running parallel to the truck's long axis, the pin removable but not removed. The panel was hinged to open upward and toward the counter, and when the last weld section gave, it did exactly that, rising on the hinge with the soft, deliberate motion of something that has been waiting a long time to move. The smell came first, machine oil, clean and specific, and beneath it a dryness that meant sealed space, undisturbed air, the inside of something that had been closed for a long time. Mara held the panel up with one hand and brought the work light close with the other. Yellow light fell into the cavity below. She saw the mason jars, 14 of them, standing upright in 2 rows of 7, each one sealed with a 2-piece canning lid, each one with a strip of masking tape on its face with a year written in ballpoint pen. The first jar read 2009, the last read 2022. She set the work light down on the counter and knelt over the opening for a long time without reaching in. She lifted the first jar out with both hands. It was a standard wide-mouth quart mason jar, the glass thick and slightly green-tinted the way old canning glass is. The 2-piece lid seated firmly with no give when she tested it with her thumb. The masking tape label read 2009 in blue ballpoint, the numerals written in the blocky, deliberate hand of a man who had learned penmanship from a teacher who still used a ruler. She set it on the counter above the opening and lifted the second jar, and then the third, and worked through all 14 that way, setting them in a row on the stainless steel work surface, each one labeled by year, each one cloudy with the slight condensation of a sealed container moved from cold to slightly less cold. The row of jars on the counter was 14 years long. She stood and looked at it. She opened the 2009 jar first, working the flat lid off with the hooked end of the pry bar slipped under the rim, the seal releasing with a soft pop and a breath of stale air. Inside, rolled tight and secured with a rubber band, were bills, 5s, 10s, a few 20s, 150, and a folded index card. She lifted the roll out and removed the rubber band, which was brittle and snapped when she stretched it, and spread the bills on the counter. She counted them twice. $180. She unfolded the index card. It was a standard 3x5 card, ruled, and on it Dale had written in the same blue ballpoint, Summer 2009. 41 route days. Gross $412. Lot fee $108. Fuel and mix $85. Supply and maintenance $39. Net $180. That was all. No commentary. No sentiment. Just the arithmetic of one summer. recorded with the precision of a man who understood that numbers do not lie and do not require elaboration. She opened each jar in sequence, oldest to newest. The amounts varied by year. Some summers had been better than others. Some had been cut short by weather or mechanical trouble. One year, 2015, showed a net of only $94 with a note that said generator rebuild, parts and labor, and another, 2018, showed $312 with no note at all, the best single year in the record. Each index card was the same format. The year, the root days, the gross, the deductions itemized the net. Dale had tracked fuel costs to the dollar and maintenance costs to the cent. He had recorded the lot fee every year without fail. $18 a month for 12 months, $216 annually, as a line item alongside fuel and mix, a fixed cost he had apparently never considered not paying, even in the lean years, even after the routes became shorter and the summers became fewer. The total across all 14 jars was $4,340. Mara counted it twice on the counter, sorting by denomination. The bills laid flat and overlapping in the way of a person who has handled small amounts of cash carefully for a long time. $4,340. Not a fortune. Not close to a fortune, but every dollar of it accounted for. Every summer's labor reduced to its net remainder, and sealed in glass and labeled by hand, and placed in a steel cavity beneath a painted floor panel, in a truck that had been sitting on flat tires behind a lumber yard for 4 years. She stacked the bills by denomination and held the stack in both hands for a moment without doing anything with it. The work light hummed on the counter beside her. The index cards she set aside in a separate stack, in order, oldest on top. She had not planned to read them again immediately, but she picked up the 2009 card and read it again, and then the 2010 card, and found herself reading through the entire stack standing at the counter in the yellow work light while the afternoon cold settled into the compartment around her. The cards were not literature, they were ledger entries. But read in sequence, they became something else. A record of a man's persistence across 14 years of showing up and doing the work and taking what the work returned and setting it aside. 2011, a wet summer, $162. 2012, $190. 2016, $244. Every year he had come back to the truck and to the routes and to the notebook in the glove box with its hand-drawn maps. And every year he had sealed whatever was left into a jar and written the year on a strip of masking tape and added it to the row. She did not hear Earl Voss approach. He appeared at the rear door of the truck with 2 mugs of coffee, both hands occupied, moving carefully on the steel bumper step. He was a man who had learned to announce himself with his footsteps rather than his voice, and Mara had been absorbed enough that even his footsteps had not reached her. He held one of the mugs out toward her without speaking. She took it. The mug was thick ceramic, stamped with the logo of a tractor supply company, and the coffee was black and had been sitting on a burner long enough to be strong without being fresh. She held it in both hands and felt the warmth move through her palms. Earl stood in the doorway looking at the row of jars on the counter and the stack of bills and the index cards in their sequence, and he did not say anything about any of it. After a while, he said that Dale had been a steady man. He said it the way you say something that is both obvious and worth saying anyway, not as consolation, but as fact. Mara nodded. She did not trust her voice to do more than that just then, and she did not try. Earl finished his coffee standing in the doorway and set the empty mug on the bumper step and made to go back to his office. Mara reached into her jacket pocket and found a folded $20 bill and held it out toward him. Earl looked at it. He shook his head once without drama and stepped down off the bumper. He said the coffee had already been made. He went back across the gravel to his portable office and pulled the door shut behind him, and the space heater inside clicked on with a sound she could hear faintly through the steel walls. Mara sat down on the floor of the compartment, back against the wheel well, the mug between her palms. The jars were still in their row on the counter above her. 14 of them. The bills were stacked beside the index cards. The cavity below the floor panel was still open, the piano hinge still extended, and in the remaining light coming through the rear door she could see into the cavity clearly enough to see that it did not end at the hinge. The floor space continued past the hinge line, deeper into the understructure of the truck, farther forward toward the cab. She had not looked that far yet. She had stopped at the jars. She sat with the coffee and looked at the open panel and the darkness beyond it, and the late afternoon light came through the rear door at a low angle and showed her the dust on the steel subfloor, undisturbed and even, except for one place near the forward end of the cavity where the dust had been wiped away in a careful arc, the way dust is wiped from a surface someone intends to come back to. The envelope was at the back of the cavity, past the jars, lying flat against the steel subfloor in the wiped-clean section she had seen from across the compartment. It was a standard number 10 business envelope, white, unsealed, the flap tucked in rather than gummed down, the way a person seals an envelope when they want it to be opened without effort. Her name was on the front in blue ballpoint. Mara. Just the one name, no last name, no address, nothing else. The handwriting was the same as the index cards. Blocky, deliberate, each letter formed separately rather than joined. She picked it up with 2 fingers and held it in the work light for a moment before she pulled the flap open. There were 2 sheets of paper inside, folded together in thirds. Standard ruled notebook paper torn cleanly from a spiral-bound pad. She unfolded them and smoothed them against her knee and read the date at the top of the first page. August 31st, 2022. 3 months before he died. The last summer the truck had been capable of running a route, she understood, though she did not know that yet with certainty. She read slowly, going back to the beginning of each paragraph before moving to the next. The way you read something you understand you will only receive once. The letter read, Mara. I am writing this at the end of the last summer I expect to work the truck. I have known since April what is coming, and I have had time to get things in order, which is more than some people get. I want to explain what you have found and what you are going to find because I will not be there to explain it in person, and I do not want you to have questions I can answer now. The jars are 14 summers of what the roots returned after costs. I started putting the money away in 2009 when the rail yard closed because I understood then that the kind of work I knew how to do was going to become less available, and I wanted there to be something set aside for you that could not be garnished or frozen or lost to a bank's fine print. I chose the truck because no one looks at the floor of a thing. I chose glass jars because they do not corrode and they do not lie. Every card inside says exactly what happened that summer. I was not able to give you much in the way of regular support after your mother left, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. What I was able to do was this. There is a second panel. It is behind the wheel, well housing on the passenger side of the serving compartment. You will need the pry bar again. The housing is held by 4 lag screws, half-inch drive, and behind it there is a steel box I fabricated in the winter of 2009. And installed in 2 days that February when the lot was empty and Earl was visiting his sister in Pikeville. The box is lined with roofing felt, tar side out, to manage condensation. It has been sealed since February of 2010. I have added to it every year since through an access panel on the underside, which you will find once the housing is off. The total inside as of this writing is $61,400. I want to say something about how that number came to exist. After the rail yard, I took every cash job that came: mobile welding, equipment repair, barn work, a grain bin installation in 2013 that paid $4,200 over 3 weeks. A bridge abutment repair in 2017 for the county that paid cash because the contractor did not want the labor on the books. I did not spend what I did not need to spend. I kept the truck running because the routes gave me a reason to be outdoors, and because the children on County Road 11 did not have many reasons to be happy in the summer. And a $1.25 cone is a small thing that is not actually a small thing. I kept paying the lot fee because the truck needed to be here when you came for it. I know you will find this because you were always the one who looked at the floor of things instead of the ceiling. When you were 4 years old, you found a dime under the refrigerator that had been there since before we moved in. When you were 7, you found the crack in the foundation on the north side of the house that the inspector had missed. You look at what is actually there. That is not a common thing. Do not let anyone persuade you it is not useful. Use the money to buy yourself ground, not a car, not anything that depreciates. Ground. A piece of property where no one can raise your rent or change the terms. Somewhere with a structure you can work on, because you know how to work on things, whether you know that yet or not. The skills are in you the same way they were in me, which is to say they are there, but they require occasion to show themselves. Give yourself the occasion. I am sorry I was not better at the parts of being a father that required words. I understood what needed doing, and I did it, and I hope that counts for something. I think it counts for something. The truck is yours, and everything in it is yours, and the title is clean. Earl Voss has been straight with me for 19 years, and he will be straight with you. Take his coffee if he offers it. Do not try to pay him. The letter was signed, Dale R. Hensley, August 31st, 2022, Calvert Fork, Kentucky. Mara read it through twice. Then she folded it carefully along its original creases and slid it back into the envelope and held the envelope against her chest with both hands, her eyes on the wheel well housing across the compartment. The work light hummed. Outside, the light had gone the particular blue-gray of a March evening, not yet dark, but no longer afternoon. The sky through the rear door the color of old zinc. A car passed on County Road 7, its headlights sweeping briefly through the tree line and then gone. She sat with the letter against her chest and did not move for a long time. She was not crying. She was doing something quieter than crying, something that did not have a common name, which is the thing that happens when you receive, very late and all at once, something you had stopped expecting to receive at all. She pressed the envelope flat and held it. The heater clicked in Earl's office. The work light hummed. The evening came down around the truck, and she sat in the middle of it and breathed. She slept in the Silverado that night, parked at the lot entrance with the doors locked and the seat reclined as far as it would go, which was not far. She had done this before, and she knew the particular arithmetic of it. Coat folded for a pillow, feet angled against the door panel. The cold coming up through the floor mat in the small hours when the engine heat was long gone. She did not try to fight the cold. She pulled her second shirt from the duffel and put it on over the first, and lay still and let her body warm the air around it in the slow, patient way that is the only way that works. She was up before the light changed, sitting upright in the gray pre-dawn with her breath showing, looking at the lot through the fogged windshield. The collapsed tarp was visible at the far end of the third row, the rear quarter of the truck pale against the darker tree line behind it. She watched it for a while. Then she got out. Earl Voss arrived at 7:15 in a 1991 Ford Ranger, the bed loaded with what appeared to be fence posts and a post hole digger. Though he left these in the truck and came directly to unlock the portable office without stopping at the ice cream truck or acknowledging that Mara was crouched on the bumper step with the socket set open across her knees. He did not ask why she was still there. He did not ask where she had slept. 20 minutes after he arrived, the portable office door opened and he set a second ceramic mug on the concrete block step without calling out to her, and she crossed the lot and took it and carried it back to the truck. It was the same strong coffee as the day before. She drank it standing at the rear door, looking at the wheel well housing on the passenger side of the serving compartment. The housing was a formed steel cover, powder-coated gray, approximately 2 feet wide and 14 inches tall. Its purpose to protect the inner wheel well from the moisture and debris that came up through the wheel arch. In a factory-built truck, it would have been spot welded in place. This one was held by 4 lag screws, half-inch drive, their heads painted over with the same gray as the housing, but not filled. The slots still clean, still accessible, as Dale had said they would be. She found the half-inch socket in the cracked plastic case and fitted it to the 3/8-inch drive and put it on the first screw. It turned on the second application of force, breaking loose from 14 years of static friction, with a short, low creak that she felt through the handle. She worked all 4 screws out and set them in a line on the counter above her, smallest head to largest, though they were all the same size. It was just the kind of order she defaulted to when her hands were moving faster than her thoughts. The housing came away from the wall with moderate resistance. Not welded, not gasketed, just seated against a foam weather strip that had compressed over the years and now gripped the wall surface with a quiet suction. She pulled it straight toward her, and it released with a sound like a hand leaving a cold window. She set it on the floor behind her and brought the work light forward on its cord. The space behind the housing was larger than she expected. Dale had modified the wheel well itself, adding a fabricated steel shelf along its upper edge and boxing in the forward face with a flat panel, creating a cavity roughly 18 inches deep, 14 inches tall, and the full 2-foot width of the housing. The forward face of the cavity was a steel panel, and in its lower left corner was a small formed handle, welded on, the kind you find on electrical panel doors or access hatches, a simple loop of half-inch round stock, bent 90 degrees at each end and welded flat. She put 2 fingers through the loop and pulled. The access panel swung outward on a continuous piano hinge along its left edge, the same type she had found in the floor panel the day before, and the smell that came out was the same. Machine oil, dry sealed air, the faint ghost of something organic that might have been the roofing felt or might have been the cash itself, the particular smell of old paper in a confined space. She held the work light at the opening with one hand. The steel box filled the cavity almost completely, a fabricated rectangular container, its seams welded on all edges with the same clean MIG bead she had found in the floor panel, its exterior surface painted with a rust-inhibiting primer that had kept its color across 14 Kentucky winters. The lid was a separate piece, fitted and held by 4 quarter-turn fasteners along its perimeter, the kind used on industrial enclosures, simple and reliable and openable without tools. She put her thumb on the first fastener and turned it, then the second, then the third, and fourth. The lid lifted straight up and she set it against the wheel well behind her. The money was in Federal Reserve paper bands, the kind used by banks, each band printed with the denomination and the total. 50s and hundreds, stacked flat in rows that filled the box to within 2 inches of the lid, the rows separated by pieces of roofing felt cut to fit the interior dimensions. Exactly. She did not count it immediately. She looked at it. The stacks were even, and the bands were intact, and the bills were dry and flat. Not the soft, slightly yielding quality of currency that has been handled, and handled again, but the crisp resistance of money that has been put away and left alone. She reached in and lifted one stack of hundreds. The paper band read 100 bills, $10,000. She set it back where it had been. She counted the stacks methodically, lifting each one and reading the band and setting it back. It took 11 minutes. When she was done, she had confirmed what the letter had told her: $61,400. 14 years of cash-side fabrication work, of mobile welding and barn repairs and off-the-books county jobs, of everything Dale Hensley had earned with his hands after the rail yard closed, that he had not needed to spend on food or fuel or lot fees or the $18 monthly rent on a gravel patch behind a lumber yard. He had put it in a box he built himself, in the back of a truck he bought at auction for $420, and he had left it there for the person he trusted to look at the floor of things. Mara fitted the lid back on the steel box and turned the 4/4-turn fasteners closed. She replaced the access panel and seated the housing back against the foam weather strip and ran the 4 lag screws back in by hand until they were snug. She did not torque them down fully. She would need to come back with a vehicle she trusted and a plan for moving what was inside, and until then the housing needed to look undisturbed from the outside. She collected the socket set and the pry bar and the work light and carried them to the portable office door and set them on the concrete block step. Earl came out a moment later. He looked at the tools and then at her face and seemed to arrive at a conclusion without asking any questions. She said she would be back in 3 days. He nodded. She said she needed the truck to stay locked, and she needed it to stay exactly where it was. He said it had been exactly where it was for 4 years, and he did not see that changing. She said she was going to pay the lot fee going forward, whatever it was, and he said the rate was $18 a month and had been for 19 years. She pressed 2 20s into his hand before he could object. He looked at the bills. He folded them once and put them in his shirt pocket and did not say they were too much, which was the first time since she had arrived that anyone had accepted something from her without argument. She walked to the Silverado. She sat in the driver's seat with the key in the ignition and did not start the engine for a long time. Outside the windshield, the lot was quiet, the tarp still half collapsed over the truck in the 3rd row. The sky above the tree line a flat pale blue that meant the cold would hold through the night. She put both hands on the wheel. She started the engine. She sat with the heat running until the glass cleared, and then she pulled out onto the dirt track and drove. She returned to the lot on Friday morning in a different vehicle, a 1996 Chevrolet Express cargo van she had rented from a one-counter operation in Harlan for $62 a day. Cash accepted. No questions about the dent in the rear quarter panel. She had spent the intervening 3 days at the shelter, in the same cot she had left on Tuesday, and she had not told anyone what she had found. She had eaten the shelter meals and washed her face in the shelter bathroom, and slept badly, and thought carefully. The way you think when you have something worth protecting for the first time in a long time, and you are not yet certain of the perimeter. She had the transfer form. She had the title, clean and unstamped. She had the letter in the envelope in the inner pocket of her jacket, where it had been since she folded it back up on Tuesday evening. The money was out of the truck and into the van in 40 minutes. The steel box lifted intact and set on a moving blanket she had bought at a hardware store for $9. The mason jars she wrapped individually in newspaper and packed in a cardboard box she had taken from behind the lumberyard's waste bin. The index cards she kept in her jacket pocket. Earl watched from the portable office doorway with his coffee. When she had the van loaded and the truck locked again, she came to the office and told him she was going to get the truck's title properly transferred and that it might take a few weeks to arrange transport for the truck itself. And she asked if the lot fee could continue month to month as it had been. Earl said it could. She paid him for March and April in advance, 2 months at $18, $36 in cash counted into his palm. He gave her a handwritten receipt, which he produced from a pad of them in the office desk drawer, the carbon copy staying in the pad. She folded the receipt and put it in her jacket. She said she would be in touch. Earl said he would be there. She drove to Harlan and rented a room at a motel on Route 119 for $44 a night, a single bed, a small bathroom, a chain lock on the door that she used. She put the steel box in the closet and the cardboard box of jars on the floor beside it, and sat on the bed and began making a list of what needed doing and in what order. She was not a person who made lists habitually, but she understood that what she had now required sequence, and she did not trust sequence to memory. Attorney first, title second, property search third, bank last, because banks required identity documentation she would need to assemble, and because the money had been safe in a sealed steel box in a locked truck for 14 years and it could remain safe in a motel closet for another few days without incident. She found Shirley Kahn through the Harlan County Bar Association's posted directory, a photocopy on a corkboard at the county clerk's office, which was the same office where she had collected the transfer form 6 days earlier. Shirley Kahn's listing said general practice, real property, and estate matters. Her office was on the second floor of a building on Central Street, up a narrow staircase with a loose banister and a landing that smelled of old coffee and copier toner. Shirley Kahn herself was a woman somewhere in her late 50s, with reading glasses on a beaded cord, and the manner of someone who had heard most variations of most situations and did not find complexity alarming. She listened to Mara for 12 minutes without interrupting. Then she asked to see the transfer form and the title. She read them both. She said the title was clean. She said it clearly and without qualification, the way you say something when you want it to be heard and not misunderstood. The man with the clipboard arrived on a Thursday, 2 days after Shirley Kahn confirmed the title. Mara had returned to the lot that morning to check on the truck and was standing at its rear door when a white Ford F-250 pulled in off the dirt track and parked near the portable office. The man who got out was somewhere past 50, well-dressed for a lot visit, pressed khakis, a canvas barn coat that was clean and had never actually been in a barn, leather work boots that were not work boots. He carried a clipboard with a legal pad on it and a pen in his breast pocket. He walked the lot in a slow arc before he approached her, looking at the other vehicles with the deliberate attention of someone who has learned that deliberate attention communicates authority. His name, he said, was Curtis Aldrin. He said he was with a property development group based in Lexington. Aldrin said he was interested in the truck and potentially in the lot parcel itself. He said he had been watching the Calvert Fork corridor for some time, and that the lumber yard's reduced operation had made several adjacent parcels interesting to his group. He said it in a pleasant voice, unhurried, the voice of a man who has made many soft pitches in many lots and backyards and does not expect resistance because resistance has rarely materialized. He wrote a number on the legal pad and turned the clipboard to show her. $3,200 for the truck. He said it was a fair offer given the truck's condition and the complications that tended to accompany inherited property in the county. He used the word complications twice, the second time with a slight pause before it, and Mara heard the pause clearly. She did not say anything for a moment. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She told Aldrin she would think about it. He gave her a business card from his breast pocket, a good quality card on heavy stock with the company name in raised lettering. She held it without looking at it. He said the offer had a short window, as these things tended to, and that he would be in the area through the end of the week. He was pleasant throughout. He did not raise his voice or change his tone. He was the kind of human obstacle that presents itself not as a wall, but as a current, slow and consistent. And the danger of it is that you drift before you notice you are moving. Mara noticed. She thanked him for stopping by and put the card in her jacket pocket and watched him walk back to the F-250. He did not look back. She called Shirley Kahn from the lot entrance, standing on the gravel near the Silverado. She described the visit and repeated the language about complications and the short window. Shirley was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said she would come in the morning. She arrived at 8:45 in a 12-year-old Buick LeSabre, in the same reading glasses and a different cardigan, carrying a leather portfolio that she had clearly owned for decades. She sat in the portable office with Earl's permission and reviewed the title again and cross-referenced it against the county property rolls on a tablet she produced from the portfolio. At 9:26, she said there was nothing complicated about it. The title was clean, the transfer was properly stamped, and the parcel lease was month to month with no encumbrance. She said if Mr. Aldrin called again, Mara could refer him to her office. She charged $211 for the hour and declined the additional 40 Mara offered. She drove back down the dirt track in the Le Sabre, the car moving carefully over the frozen ruts, and was gone. Joel Sharp appeared that same afternoon, shortly after 2. He came on foot up the dirt track, which was unusual enough that Earl came to the portable office doorway to watch. He was perhaps 19, carrying a canvas bag over one shoulder and wearing a denim jacket that was not warm enough for March. He had the particular quality of someone who has been walking for a while and has gotten used to it. He stopped at the lot entrance and looked at the vehicles in the rows, and then at Mara, who was relocking the truck's rear door. He asked if the ice cream truck was for sale. His voice was careful, the way a voice is careful, when the person using it is trying not to reveal how much the answer matters. Mara looked at him for a moment. He had the same hollow economy of movement she recognized from 11 months of provisional spaces, the way a person holds themselves when they are not certain of the next 24 hours. She told him it was not for sale. She told him she was going to need a mechanic once she had arranged transport, if he knew engines. He said he knew engines. She asked his name. He gave it. She wrote Earl's lot number on a piece of paper torn from the composition notebook she had found in the truck's glove box, Dale's route notebook, the hand-drawn map still inside, and gave it to Joel Sharp and told him to call that number in 3 weeks. He took the paper and folded it into his jacket pocket. He said thank you in the same careful voice. She said it was nothing. She turned back to the truck. It was not nothing, and they both knew it, and neither of them said so. The property was on Locust Creek Road, 4 miles east of Calvert Fork, a narrow lot with a concrete block commercial building that had last been used as a small engine repair shop, and before that as a feed supply annex, and before that as something no one still living could remember with certainty. Dale Hensley had co-signed the lease agreement in 2011 for the Calvert Fork Volunteer Fire Auxiliary, which had used the building 2 evenings a week for training and equipment storage until the auxiliary folded in 2017 for lack of members. After that, the building had sat idle, the lease payments stopping, the back taxes accumulating quietly in the county rolls, the way things accumulate when no one is watching them. The total owed was $4,080. Mara paid it on a Monday morning in the first week of April at the county assessor's office, in cash, in an envelope she had prepared the night before. The clerk counted it twice. She gave Mara a stamped receipt and a cleared title certification and said it was the fastest resolution of a back tax account she had processed in her 11 years in the office. She had not gone looking for the property. The property had found her. The way things her father had touched kept finding her in the weeks after the truck, through short sentences from people who had known him and felt, now that his daughter was present and accounted for, that certain things ought to be said. A woman named Ruth Caudle had knocked on the portable office door at the lot one afternoon, while Mara was measuring the truck's interior for the restoration plan, and had stood in the doorway holding a covered dish and said that Dale had co-signed something years back for the auxiliary and that she had always wondered if anyone would ever square it. Ruth set the covered dish on Earl's desk without being invited to and said it was beef stew and left. Mara ate the stew that evening, sitting on the truck's bumper, and looked up the parcel number Shirley Kahn found for her the following morning. Once the back taxes were cleared and the property transferred, word moved through Calvert Fork the way word moves in small rural places, not quickly, not loudly, but completely, touching everyone within a certain radius before the week was out. People came to the lot in ones and twos, in the late afternoons mostly, some of them bringing things, and some of them bringing only their short sentences. Garrett Poole came and said Dale had repaired his flatbed axle housing in the winter of 2014 and refused any payment, and that he had thought about it many times since. A man named Howard Fitch said Dale had shown up unannounced at his place on County Road 11 in the spring of 2016, when Howard's hay barn roof had failed under a late snow, and that Dale had worked 2 full days with his own equipment and taken nothing but a ham sandwich and a cup of coffee. Beverly Marsh came and brought a jar of sourwood honey and said it was the second one, that the first had been accepted by Dale in 2012 as payment for a soft-serve cone, and she had always meant to bring another. Mara accepted it with both hands. Joel Sharp called the lot number 3 weeks to the day after she had given it to him. Earl handed her the phone across the desk with the expression of a man who had been expecting the call. Joel came out the following Tuesday in a rusted Nissan pickup that ran well enough to make the drive from Pineville, and he spent 40 minutes under the hood of the truck and another 20 under the chassis before he came to find Mara with his assessment. The engine was a 350 cubic inch small block, original to the truck, with a cracked intake manifold gasket and a water pump that was seeping at the impeller seal. The chassis was sound. The generator needed a new voltage regulator and a set of brushes. He said he could have it running in 2 weekends if she could cover parts. She asked what the labor would cost. He said whatever she thought was fair. She said she would pay him by the hour at the rate a licensed mechanic would charge, and he opened his mouth to decline, and she told him it was not a negotiation. He closed his mouth. He came back the following Saturday with a toolbox in the Nissan bed and started on the intake manifold. The restoration took 6 weeks in total. The engine work was Joel's. Mara handled the body, wire brushing the wheel well rust down to clean metal, treating it with a rust converter, priming and painting the lower panels in a white that was not quite the original white but close enough to read correctly at a distance. She replaced the serving window's rubber gasket, which had hardened and cracked, with a length of automotive door seal she bought at an auto parts store in Harlan for $7 and cut to fit with a utility knife. She rehung the tarp that had collapsed, stringing new rope through the grommets so that the truck had shelter again while it was not running. She found, in the portable office's bottom desk drawer, the hand-lettered banner Dale had removed from the truck's side panel before he parked it, red and blue on a white ground, the lettering done in the sign painter's style, unhurried and exact. She had it remounted by a man in Bledsoe who worked with adhesive vinyl for $12 and did not ask why she was restoring a 50-year-old ice cream truck. On the first Friday in May, the truck ran its first route since the summer of 2019. Joel followed in his Nissan the first 2 miles to confirm the temperature gauge stayed level and the generator held its load. And then he turned back at the County Road 7 junction, and Mara drove alone. The route was a shortened version of one from Dale's composition notebook, the hand-drawn map propped on the dash, the route days column still blank on the current year's page. She had bought soft-serve mix and cones from a restaurant supply house in Harlan and had the machine running cold by 8 in the morning. The first customer was a boy of about 7 on County Road 11 who heard the generator from inside his house and came running out in one sock. She charged him $1.25. He did not have it. She told him the price was whatever he had. He turned out his pockets and produced 37 cents and a button. She took the 37 cents. She gave him a cone. She parked the truck at the edge of County Road 7 at the end of the route, engine off, the generator running on idle to keep the mix cold for the following day. The evening came in from the east, the way May evenings come in the hill country, slowly, with color draining from the sky in layers, the blue going gray and the gray going the deep, soft purple that precedes full dark. The tree line across the road went black against it. She left the serving window open and sat on the rear bumper with her boots on the gravel and the smell of waffle cone and cut grass moving around her in the still air. She had the composition notebook open on her knee and she was filling in the current year's first route day entry. The gross, the deductions she could calculate, the net still incomplete. She wrote in blue ballpoint. She wrote in the same blocky, deliberate hand that the notebook already contained, which was not a thing she had decided to do but which had happened anyway. A woman came up the gravel track on foot, a duffel bag over one shoulder, the particular economy of movement that Mara recognized without having to think about it. She stopped at the serving window. She looked at the price board Mara had made from a piece of plywood and a can of white paint. $1.25 for a cone. $1.50 for a dipped one. She looked at the board for a moment. She said she did not have much. Mara asked how much was not much. The woman counted what she had. 51 cents. Mara made a cone and set it on the window ledge and said that would do. The woman took it. She stood at the window eating it in the last of the evening light, and she did not say much, and Mara did not ask much, and the generator hummed its low, even note into the blue coming dark. The work a man does in silence does not disappear. It waits.